Hello and welcome everyone to today's cloud coaching session. My name is Tara Van Cleve and I'm a marketing event manager for the developer initiative here at Oracle. Today we're excited to show you the new features in Oracle Integration Cloud Gen 3. If you do not currently have an Oracle Cloud account, we've got a special promotion with extra credits so that you can try out OCI services and follow along with the demo today. To access the promo, please sign up using the same email that you registered with for the event. We'll also be recording the session, and the link to the recording will be sent to you via email in the next couple of days. If you have any questions during the webinar, we've set up a channel in our developer public Slack called Cloud Coaching North America that you can access at the QR code here or at bit.ly/odevrel_Slack. And once you're in, you'll land in the general channel, and from there, you can search for the webinar channel. We'll also be taking questions in the Zoom chat here as well, and the Zoom Q&A areas. After the demo concludes, we'll go live. Today's webcast will be presented by Wilson Randall, Senior Cloud Engineer. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Wilson.
Thank you, Tara. All righty, so for today's webinar, I wanted to go over, as Tara said, a couple of new features in Oracle Integration Gen 3. So kind of the new generation of our Oracle Integration Cloud platform. But I wanted to level set on a couple of things first. So we got our agenda here. I wanted to sync on what is Oracle Integration Cloud, what is the Integration Cloud platform, both in general, as well as what does the new Gen 3 platform look like, and what is kind of the motivation behind that. After that, we'll go through our use cases. So go through the couple of features that we're highlighting in today's webinar. So going over the parallel task or parallel action feature in OIC Gen 3, as well as looking at the projects feature in OIC Gen 3. I'll actually log into the console, show you what that looks like in Gen 3, and kind of walk you through each one of those features. And finally, if time permits, we'll have a little bit of an overview of the Code Innovate program offered by Oracle for some of our customers, and then we'll follow it up with Q&A at the end. So just to kind of start off and level set with Oracle integration. So some of you may have a background and understand what Oracle Integration Cloud is, but for those of you who aren't so familiar, just wanted to provide some context and background into the integration tool set provided by Oracle. So what is Oracle Integration Cloud and what does it do? So Oracle Integration Cloud is an enterprise iPaaS platform, so integration platform as a service. And when you think of it, there's some components to it. There's multiple kind of layers that go into the whole foundation of Oracle integration. But the ones that we're focusing on, and the ones that we'll mainly be looking at, is going to be under this real-time system integration piece here. And this is going to be kind of the core platform or the core integration component that I like to think about. So think about connecting to different systems, connecting to cloud-based applications, connecting to SaaS, connecting to a database, running some queries, stored procedures, running some file-based integrations. So kind of thinking about the orchestration and kind of the technical piping behind a lot of different systems and kind of bringing that all together. Keeping them synced is a very common use case, but just being able for those systems to talk to each other and being able to share data, translate data, orchestrate data across those disparate systems. There's also additional components in Oracle Integration Cloud that also are baked into the overall solution. So there's also a process automation platform, which is useful for any human-based approval use case. So say if you want to submit an expense report, or say you're building out a web application, you want to have a manager look at an invoice and approve an invoice before it's actually submitted to an ERP system. That's somewhere where process automation comes into play. And then there's a couple of other components as well. So there's Visual Builder, which is a very powerful low-code development platform for spinning up kind of front-end web apps frequently used in the context of extension of applications. So, you can extend Oracle Fusion, Oracle SAS with Visual Builder. You can run the integrations that you built out in OIC, kind of in that core application integration component. You can run those in Visual Builder, and they play nice together. And then there's also an integration insight, which is it's kind of like an analytics platform within OIC, within integration, and it's especially useful at scale if you've got a set of integrations where you're looking at kind of the business level or the business transaction level, and you want to get some more insight, as the name suggests, into what's happening in those transactions, kind of again on the more business level. There is monitoring and observability and tracking and logging tools provided out of the box by OIC, by Oracle integration, but Insight is again for more of those business level transactions and business level visibility into your integrations that are executing. And also OIC can connect to SaaS apps and cloud apps, of course. It's a cloud-based solution, but it can also connect to on-premise apps and on-premise systems through the use of a connectivity agent. So whether it's cloud to cloud or cloud to ground, both patterns are supported here. So there's quite a lot of adapters. You might hear these referred to as connectors, but they're called adapters in OIC when we connect to these various applications. So you've got adapters for, no surprise, quite a lot of Oracle applications, Oracle Fusion, ERP, HCM, quite a lot of third-party application adapters as well. So we frequently integrate with Salesforce and other Workday, ServiceNow, things like that. There's also quite a lot of database adapters. So it can connect to, of course, Oracle databases. We can connect to autonomous databases, SQL Server is very common. And in addition, there's a few other adapters that are quite useful if, say, there's not an adapter out of the box for a particular application. Now, if you're looking at, say, integrating with Oracle ERP or Oracle Fusion, these adapters are not only an interface where you instead of defining an API or defining a connector yourself and having to manually program everything, there's kind of a wizard that walks you through, I want to call this endpoint, or I want to call, this extract, or I want to, interact with this service. And it's pretty much selecting it from a drop-down menu or selecting it from a wizard where it kind of guides you through those steps. And it's very useful for kind of very quickly starting development and accelerating that process. Now, if there's not an adapter for a particular application or service, there's our technology connectivity adapters down there. And that allows you to connect to pretty much anything that has a REST API, anything that has a SOAP web service, any accessible FTP server, so any file server. So it's very powerful in what it can actually connect to and kind of the developer and productivity tools that are available to you as well. I want to also mention on the side that there is a secure file server that comes along with OIC now. So it's 500 gigabytes SFTP server. You can use it for whatever you want. I've seen some customers use it just kind of like a sandbox for testing. I've seen some customers use it for, production type workloads, things like B2B or EDI use cases, kind of as a landing zone for documents and communicating with trading partners, or integrating with file-based use cases. So just wanted to mention this on the side. And what are some common use cases for OIC for integration? So there's quite a lot. It is an integration platform, an enterprise integration platform. Some common ones that we've seen or that I've worked with customers with is going to be like a data sync use case where you kind of just want application 1 and application 2 to have the same data. I just want to sync those together. Very common. You can do database level operations. You can insert into a table, you can call a stored procedure, you can run straight SQL. And then there's quite a lot in addition to that as well. I mean, the sky is the limit with OIC and with integration platforms. So anything that pretty much has an API, anything that has an interface that can be integrated with, can likely be integrated with in OIC as long as there's those adapters or those connectors that can interface with those. So B2B, file-based import-export, spinning up your own application in Visual Builder and leveraging the integrations is like an application extension. So there's lots of capability in this. So benefits and differentiators, I'll just go through these briefly, but there's no infrastructure to manage with OIC. You just click a button, it spins it up. You don't have to worry about, oh, how many cores or how much RAM or, how many processors do I have? Don't have to worry about that. We manage the infrastructure for you. Rich adapter support. So going through those adapters and connectors as we just went over. Quite a lot of adapters, connectors out of the box for you. And that list continues to grow. And it continues to grow, especially in Gen 3. There's a few new adapters in there that were highly requested that we've added. Developer friendly. So it's not something where you have to have a extremely deep technical background in XML and need to know how to code in XSLT and have a very deep understanding of programming in that respect. Of course, that's a bonus if you do, but it's UI driven, it's wizard driven, it's drag and drop, it's visual development. It's not way down deep in the weeds where you have to, you have to write or program something yourself. It's not like that. And then monitoring and troubleshooting. So let's say, okay, you've got your integrations done, you've built them out. Now, what does it look like when we're actually observing those integrations? How many times have they run? How long did it take them to run? What are the payloads associated with that? So there's quite a good suite of resources and tools available for that on multiple levels. And that's also something that is iterated upon and improved upon in Gen 3, which we'll see. So just wanted to mention this as well briefly. So recently Gartner released a new report for integration platform as a service. And you can see Oracle right up there in the tippy top, in the top right. And this just goes to show that we are here in the integration platform space. A lot of work went into this. It's something we're very proud of, and goes to show that we're a significant player in this. Have a link right there if you want to view that report yourself, but you can also just do a search online. You should be able to find it for specifically integration platform as a service, Gartner's Magic Quadrant, and then you can see Oracle there. All right, so we level set about Oracle Integration Cloud in general. Now let's talk about Gen 3. Let's talk about specifically what the motivation is for Gen 3. What does it entail? What are the changes? What does it look like? And get into that. So OIC Gen 3, Oracle Integration Gen 3, what is it and why is it here? So for the past several years, we've been on what we've called Oracle Integration Gen 2, which has been fine and well. It's been great. But now we're on to Gen 3 as kind of the next iteration or kind of the next step, the next stepping stone from Gen 2. So we're looking to continue on the improvements and optimizations that we made in Gen 2. And looking to build on that and make a better user experience as well as a better technical product as well. So there's things like auto scaling, better performance, and then also allows us for quicker time to market for new features. So if there's a new feature that needs to be developed either from the customer or from our side, it'll take less time to actually build that and implement it in Gen 3. And then of course, there's also the kind of the new Redwood look and feel for OIC Gen 3. So we're upgrading the interface, making it more in line with Oracle's updated Redwood UI. And it's just sleeker. It's more UI driven, and it's a little bit. It looks better. It looks and feels better. So what are the benefits of Oracle integration Gen 3? So what would you get from moving from Gen 2 to Gen 3, or today if you wanted to spin up a fresh new instance of Oracle integration Gen 3? So new look and feel, as I just said, so kind of in line with the new Redwood UI. It's a little bit snappier and cleaner. Loosely coupled components. So in Gen 2, if you think back to OIC, you had Oracle Integration Cloud, the application integration piece, kind of that core component, as well as process automation kind of running on the same server. But now that's not the case. So it's a little bit more scalable. It's more loosely coupled. There's better performance. So we run tests. OIC Gen 3 does have better performance, measurably better performance than Gen 2. And in addition to that, it's more predictable. So you get less kind of peaks and troughs. It's kind of more uniform. It's a little bit more consistent in performance. So that's always good to have, makes it more predictable. Improved metrics and observability. So you may have used the monitoring tool or the tracking, the message tracking tool in Gen 2. So that is now referred to as observability in Gen 3. We've made some improvements to that. But there's also more data available to you, to the customer, on a more granular level with metrics and observability now. So you can kind of get a little bit more, or not a little bit more, a lot more detail into what's happening in those integrations, how many messages are being consumed, what adapters are being called, and so forth. So it gives you more detail, gives you more level of observability in those. Easier to scale, improved developer experience. So the UI, the look and feel is different, but also the navigation is a lot more cleaner. There's less clicks to get to the same places in OIC Gen 3 now. So it's a bit more straightforward to navigate, and that means it's easier and quicker to build things in OIC Gen 3. And then with Gen 3, there are new big features coming as well, or have been delivered. So those include projects, which is a new way to kind of organize together like components in OIC, just so you're not having to deal with all of your integrations and connections in one place. You can kind of subdivide those logically into their own kind of little grouping there, what we call projects. There's more functionality, but we'll go through it. There's resource-based access control, which is coming. So you can say, oh, I want developer 1 to be able to access this set of integrations, but not this set of integrations, and gives you more granular control in that way. There's caching, which is coming. And then there's parallel processing, which is a cool new feature where you can split up branches in OIC. It doesn't have to be sequential like it is in Gen 2, where you have to go, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, and wait for each one of those steps. Now you can actually split up a branch and execute segments of an integration simultaneously. So we'll be covering projects and parallel processing right after we level set here. Yeah. So let's go into kind of the overview of parallel tasks now. So I was talking about before, in OIC Gen 3, big ticket item, you can get to a point in an integration where you say, oh, I've got this particular use case where I don't care if action 1 completes first, and then I have to wait, and then I have to wait, and then go to action 2, and then I have to wait for action 2 to complete, and then I have to go to action 3. If you don't care about what finishes first, and if it doesn't need to be in sequence, you can run those in parallel now. So OIC can actually do a parallel execution of segments in an integration, which is really, really useful for quite a lot of use cases. So an example of that might be you're running an integration that maybe you have an application or software that's going to give cars, hotels, flights to a traveler who's registering for a business trip. Well, you don't care if you query the cars and then you have to wait for the cars to finish and then query the hotel and then wait for the hotel to finish and then query the flights. You don't care if one finishes before you go to the next one. You just want all those pieces of information. You want to see that data as quick as you can possibly get it. So hence the consideration or the introduction of parallel processing in that use case. You just want to see that data as soon as you can possibly fetch it into your application. So you split flows into parallel tracks. You can have branch 1, branch 2, but you can have multiple branches. You can have branch 3, branch 4 if you wanted to. And you gather results at the end, so you kind of bring them together. And we'll show this in action in just a few minutes. And then second, we have projects in OIC Gen 3. So what are projects? So projects are a new way to organize resources in Oracle Integration Cloud Gen 3. So previously in Gen 2, you kind of had all of your integrations in one place, no matter when they were created or who they were created by. You had all your connections in one place. You had all your lookups in one place, and they're kind of grouped together in one big bundle, one big group. But with projects, you can now logically kind of group those by what we've called projects, but you can group them together in whatever logical fashion you want to. You can keep them in their own little section and kind of compartmentalize them in OIC. So no longer do you, if you're looking at connections and integrations, you have to go, okay, now I'm going to go to integrations, okay, deactivate. Okay, now I need to update this connection. So I'm going to go to connections and then, need to put a filter to find my connection and then update that. You're not sifting through, all of your integrations in your entire instance. It's just a one-stop shop. It's more manageable. It makes more sense from a UI standpoint. So there's simplified navigation. There's faster context switching. So, if you go from project 1 to project 2, you've got everything in one spot for each one of those projects. There's resource-based access control, which is coming, which I touched up on before. But then there's also deployment. So you can configure, you design your integrations. You say, okay, I've got my integration complete. I've got my connections up and running for this project. Now I want to actually activate those integrations and run them. So there's some deployment configurations that you can configure to kind of do all of that activation in one go. So say you got, 10 different integrations in a project, you can activate them all at once. It doesn't have to be one by one by one by one. And then you've got testing and observability in the same place. And again, thinking back to Gen 2, that's like that monitoring tool. So within projects, you can look at, I only want to look at the integrations that have been activated for this particular project. You don't have to sift through, your entire environment's integration, monitoring, and tracking. So it's everything in one place. Got some screenshots here, but we can also show this in the environment, as I'll do. But first, you kind of have your high-level project. So what do you want to call your project? Kind of going a layer deeper, you've got your design section of your project. So these will include your integrations. They'll include your connections. And then they'll also include 2 other components, your lookup tables and your JavaScript libraries. All in one project. Now, again, this is kind of different from or separated from other projects and from the rest of the larger environment. This is, compartmentalized in one place. It's your one-stop shop. And then you have your observability. So this monitoring, this is very similar to, the instance-wide monitoring, where you can look at, all of your integrations in your environment being triggered off and seeing how they behave. But this is specific to just the integrations that you put into this particular project. So you can look at the level of granularity where you're just looking at tracking and monitoring for the set of integrations in this particular project. So it's very, very more well organized and easier to navigate and just easier to manage and understand in general, just so you're not sifting through and having to, filter and look at identifiers and do all this. It's a lot more streamlined and a lot more easier to understand. All righty, so now let's shift gears into the demo. All righty, so I am logged into an OIC Gen 3 console. And the way that you get here is through the OCI console. So you'll go to developer services, but I've skipped all the boring navigation stuff and gone straight to the source in OIC Gen 3. So this is the home page, and as you can see, it looks kind of similar to OIC Gen 2's homepage, but here you've got a bird's eye view of what's happening in the integration instance. You've got, how many messages, how many integrations have been triggered in your OIC instance. You've got visual apps if you're building applications with Visual Builder. And then you've got recipes and accelerators, which are very useful to kind of get started. But these are integrations or sets of integrations and connections that you can actually import into your own environment and get started. They're like templates. They're like templates that you can import and use to jumpstart your own development. But what we are interested in is going to be first our parallel tasks. So I've got an integration that's already up and running that demonstrates this WR parallel processing integration. And our scenario here, so I'll go over this integration first. So it's quite simple from an integration standpoint, but just to walk you through piece by piece, you got some REST trigger starting off here. So what this means is we're exposing this integration as pretty much a REST endpoint, an HTTPS endpoint that you can call from any application or any service that can call a REST API or a REST endpoint. It's immediately going to take the data in there. I've got some JSON payload, got some data coming in from that trigger. It's going to execute our parallel processing function here, or parallel branch. And here, we're actually going to take that data that we just received. We're going to write it to a CSV, to a flat file. And then we're also going to insert it into a table on our autonomous transaction processing database. And we're doing these two simultaneously. So a scenario for something like this, maybe you have a upstream application where, you want to sync this data, or you want to store the data that's coming in. And then in this case, I've got contacts. So I've got, my name, my role, my address. Maybe you got some CRM software where you want to call an integration and store this data somewhere downstream for safekeeping or for reporting or for analytics or whatever you want to sync that data to. So again, we're using the parallel branch here where we're coming into branch one. It's going to map this data. So pretty much that mapping function is where data handoff happens from service to service or application to application. In our case, it's going to be the data coming from our initial entry point of the integration. And we're saying, oh, I'm just going to be the mapper. I'm just saying, oh, I'm going to take that same data. I'm just going to write it to my address book. So pretty simple. I'm just going to do a one-to-one mapping, no fancy functions needed, no complex translations needed, but there is support for that if you do have some translation or orchestration needed in the mapper there. But for here, I'm just kind of keeping it simple. I just want to map my address book to my address book from my source, from my upstream application to my file. Similar mapping for my database, except in this mapper, we're taking that same data from the source, my address or my contacts, but this time instead of writing it to a CSV or writing it to a flat file, we're now inserting it into ATP, into Oracle Transaction Processing Database. So we're actually running a query that's going to insert this into the table. And again, both of these are executed simultaneously. So once that integration gets triggered, it's going to enter in this parallel task, this parallel process. It's going to do both of these at the same time. Now, previously in Gen 2, it had to be sequential. You had to first write the file, and that can take a few seconds. And then once the file was done writing, then you had to call your query to insert into your table, or call a downstream API. And from a design standpoint, it's not always the best. It can be acceptable, but now with OIC Gen 3, you do have the capability to run these tasks, run these branches in parallel. It doesn't have to be writing a file, doesn't have to be writing to a database. You can drop in any adapter or any function you want to, as long as it's supported in OIC. You could call an API, you could do some other transaction, you can assign your variables, you can do logging, whatever needs to be done can be within these branches. So after we have both written to our file and inserted into our table, it's just going to return back to our client application with just a human readable response status, just saying, hey, integration executed, completed, contacts were inserted, file was written, just to give you some context into that the integration completed successfully. So if I go back and now run this integration, so I'm going to use OIC's inbuilt testing tool, which is very useful and very handy for testing out integrations within the console. And you get that by the 3 dots and then run. But if you have another API testing tool like Postman or something equivalent, then you can also use that. But I just like to use the inbuilt testing tool. So I've got some sample data and just some junk data that we're passing in. And this is going to go to both those places at the same time. We're going to write it to the file. We're going to insert it into the database. So I'll go ahead and run. It'll take just a few seconds while it executes that transaction and orchestrates. Okay, so I got a response and we can see, okay, 200 okay. And then we got that response that we mapped back to our client application. So integration execution complete, contact starting with Wilson. Yep, that's me. We're inserted into the contacts table. And then the file parallel output.csv, which I've specified was written to my SFTP server. So on the right side, you can see our activity stream. So you can see exactly what happened in the integration. So what we are interested in is going to be this parallel action. So you can see it went through there, 2 branches. You can see that it wrote the file in branch 1. And if you wanted to, you could look at kind of the XML level payload, as you can see there. So yep, that's the data that we sent in. So it wrote the file. And then at the same time, again, we're not doing this sequentially. This is at the exact same time as we were writing that file, we inserted it into our context table in ATP. So you can see right there, yep, there's the response that we got when we inserted that. So you can see both of those actions executed successfully. Now let's check the results of that. So give me just one moment. Need to do some networking magic. Okay. So in my contacts table, so I've done a few test runs before, but you can see it's inserted that, as well as my other sample fields there. You can see in the table, we are good there. And then in my file server, There we go. So I've got this parallel output.csv that's been written to my directory on my OIC SFTP server, also provided in OIC, by the way. And you can see, yep, it's April 13th at 9:34 Pacific time. That lines up. If I download that and show that, give me just one moment. There it is. So I've opened it up in Excel, so it's got some funny formatting for the numbers, but yep, there's the data that we passed into that integration. Wilson, that's me, Oracle, as well as our other sample data, and it's written it to this CSV file here. So again, it's done both of those operations simultaneously. So very powerful feature, very useful in a variety of circumstances, and fairly easy to implement. It's just going to be that parallel action under your components in OIC. You know, it's no different from dropping in a switch statement or a for each loop or, you know, an adapter call in there. It's just called parallel. All righty. So now let's switch gears into the projects feature that we've got going on here. Integrations, and then you have your entire list of all of your integrations in the entire OIC instance. And you kind of had to sift through that to find the ones that you wanted to get to. Same thing with the connections as well. Now we have our projects tab here, which is net new in Oracle Integration Gen 3. So if we go into projects there, we've got a couple of projects here that are already created for us. But I'll go ahead and go into this particular project. And now you can see here, we're at a different window that you might not have seen in Oracle Integration Gen 3. But now that I'm in this project, you can see that we've got our collection of those 4 resources that are all grouped together in this particular project. So we've got 3 different integrations. We've got a couple of connections that we're using in this project. We've got a sample lookup table that I've brought in, and we've got libraries, JavaScript functions if we need to do some, you know, custom translation in there. But as you can see here, in design time, all of these things are logically grouped together here. They're not, you know, they're not mixed in with the rest of the integrations in your integration instance. They're all kind of in this one-stop shop in this one place. So it's a lot more streamlined. It's a lot more organized. It's easier to keep things logically separated, and you know, that leads to faster development time and you know, ease of use of the platform in general. So let's say, okay, you know, my integrations are good. Let's deploy them. Let's actually activate them here. So I've actually got a couple of deployments here during my, you know, normal development process in OIC. In this particular deployment, I've got all of my integrations. So you can now activate and deactivate these integrations in bulk now. You don't have to, you know, power each one on individually like you had to in Gen 2. So it's a lot easier to test, you know, this project, this set of integrations and connections and other components. That's also very helpful from a development perspective. And then we have the observability. So again, in OIC Gen 3, you might be familiar with the monitoring tab in Gen 2, but in Gen 3, it's now called observability. So within the projects tab, so I'm within my test project up here, we've got observability for the integrations that, again, are only within the scope of this particular project. So I've got some previous test runs that I ran before. So these are from yesterday or from this morning. And as you can see, you know, my Hello World scheduled integration that I've got in my design tab here was the one that was executed. And let's go ahead and execute it again. It's just doing pretty much nothing. It's just kind of a dummy integration. I'm just assigning a variable and sending out an email and doing some other funny stuff. But let's go ahead and execute it. So I'll go ahead and run. So scheduled integrations you can run on demand from OIC. So I got our activity stream there that's generated when the integration has run. So it started executing. And let's go back to observability. And you can see there, okay, we've got our integration instance that has been tracked and logged in observability, aka monitoring. So if I open it up, you can see, oh, integration has run. It's gone through all of its components. Green light means good, no errors. Everything's gone through just fine. Okay. But again, it doesn't really matter that the integration executed with this particular data. It's really the functionality of looking at it within the scope of the projects. So as you can see here, the only integration instances that are going to pop up here that are going to be populated within this observability under this project are only going to be these set of integrations that are within the scope of this project. So, you're not sifting through, you're not going through every single integration that's been tracked or logged in your integration instance, which can be a little bit cumbersome if you've got an integration instance that's running at scale. It's a lot more streamlined, a lot more straightforward, a lot better organized with this project's feature. So that's something that we're also very excited about. Now, we've got a little bit of extra time, so I've got a bonus highlight or bonus feature of OIC Gen 3 that we can show, and this is also a net new feature. So I'll deactivate this so we can open up this integration and show it. But what it's going to be is it's going to be the cut and paste feature in OIC Gen 3, which is a net new feature. So in OIC Gen 2, you had, let's go to a different integration actually, just to show. In OIC Gen 2, you had what's called the reposition function in the design canvas, which allowed you to move specific adapter components or mapper components from one location to the other. What cut and paste is kind of an iteration of that. It's an improvement of that. So in OIC Gen 2, you could move, a single assign function, let's say, or you could move a single notification function or a single adapter call or a single node in OIC. But with the cut and paste function, you can do that. You can move individual components. You can move the notification component and place it in a different branch of the integration flow if you wanted to. But you can also now cut and paste entire switch statements, entire for loops, entire while loops. You can cut and paste parallel processing branches. So you can cut and paste. You can see in this switch statement, I've got some functions in here. I can cut now this entire component, including the encapsulated functions within this switch statement. Again, can be another for each loop or likewise. Let me refresh the page real quick. But with that, say if you wanted to move this entire switch statement to the beginning of the integration, you can cut and paste that entire switch statement, that entire function now. All of the encapsulated adapter calls, functions, mapping, orchestration components come along with it in that cut and paste function. So it's very, very useful if you have some refactoring to do, or if you've changing the design of an integration, but you want to retain that functionality. Very useful for that. And yeah, it was just a little bonus feature. But with that concludes the the presentation and the demo. I know we have a few slides or a few a few items on the Code Innovate itself. I could go with that. All right, so in addition to being a integration cloud engineer at Oracle, I also happen to be on a team called the Virtual Code Innovate team. And you might be asking yourself, well, he's been talking about a Code Innovate program. What is a Code Innovate program, or what is a Code Innovate engagement? So a Code Innovate is a 5-day, half-day online event that we work with some of our customers with to get you hands-on with our Oracle Cloud services, get you working with our engineers, get your engineers and our engineers in the same virtual room in Zoom. Name of the game is going to be twofold. We're going to facilitate learning. So we're going to get you hands-on keyboard, working with Oracle Cloud, working with these services, as well as building out your use case. So it's kind of a twofold program there. No cost, so no cost for the actual program itself. There might be a little bit of consumption with the cloud services, but it's a $0 engagement. Integration, OIC, any integration use cases out there, totally within scope for a Code Innovate program. I've covered quite a few Code Innovates regarding OIC, regarding Oracle Integration Cloud. So if you're in that space, then feel free to reach out to us and we can get that ball rolling. So what does it look like end to end? So again, you bring your use case to the table. It's not something that we're bringing a pre-built lab or a pre-built workshop. It's something that is relevant to you, relevant to your workloads, to your business. Rapid knowledge share. So we bring our developers to the table, you bring your developers to the table, and we get working on something. We get working on building out that use case that we've scoped out for the event. Again, 5-day half event. So about 4 hours for 1 week for 5 days, Monday through Friday. And then we work on building out a first pass prototype. So maybe it won't be a production ready solution, just given a timeline of a week-long sprint end to end, but we can give a first pass prototype. We can kind of get our foot in the door. We can get you hands-on. We can get you onboarded. We can get you out of the gates and pass the baton to you once that program has ended, once our engagement has ended for a Code Innovate. So please reach out, please contact us if this is something that interests you. There's an email on the left there, or you can just send your email or contact information in Zoom chat, and we'll collect that and we can get the ball rolling.
Thank you so much for joining us here today, and we hope to see you all again next time.